broadcasting live 4 days a week worldwide
from the sunny beaches of Southern California.
This is ExtremeHealthRadio.com.
Hi, this is the Health Ranger Mike Adams from naturalnews.com, and I'm listening to Justin and Kate on Extreme Health Radio. Tune in every day for awesome shows that will empower you to change your life.
With all the advances in medical technology today, the key to longevity may be as simple as vitamin C. Discover the power of lipospheric vitamin C at extremehealthradio.com/vitamin C. Are you ready to feel younger and healthier? Harness the healing power of the C. Take control of your health and visit extremehealthradio.com/C, S-E-A, and use the coupon code JUSTIN, J-U-S-T-I-N, and get 20% off. Discover the secret to eternal youth. Sweet, sassy, molassy Kate, I'm excited about this show.
You have been talking about this for over a week, and you're so excited, and it makes me really excited. I love it.
Oh, this is good, isn't it?
It's a little bit different today, and I think it's really good to have a little bit different content than we're usually used to.
We are usually not used to this, and this is going to be a lot of fun because this is the first time ever we've been covering this on our show. In fact, did we covered a little bit with, we had Marjorie Wildcraft on.
Oh, that's,
she was,
yeah.
Like way early on in the show. But that was so long ago. This is going to be a lot of fun.
And I wasn't on that, so this is new to me.
I know. It's good, huh? Mm-hmm. All right, so we're going to be talking about self-reliance, sustainability, herbs, natural medicines, the Ebola virus that's going on right now, with all this news going on with the Ebola virus. This is going to be a really good show, so stay tuned. We're going to introduce Matthew Stein on in just a minute. But if you guys would like to support the show, there's lots of different ways to do that. If you want to go through our link on Amazon, that's the easy way to do that because most people make purchases there anyway. And if you go through our link, extremehealthradio.com/Amazon, any time you go to Amazon for any and all purchases, that would help keep the show free. So we'd appreciate that. There's also a link on the top right of our website if you want to check that out and just click over there. And then we have our sponsors for today's show, which are Live On Labs and S&C. And I took a bunch of their products right before I went to bed last night.
Yeah.
Slept like a baby.
Yeah, you did. You didn't even move.
I didn't even move. So, yeah, Live On Labs, S&C, great companies, great products. So check those out on our sponsors page. And as I said earlier, we do broadcast live 4 days a week on Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday at 9 a.m. Pacific time. So you can join the chat room and all the festivities, the fiesta, the fun, the party, all of that. You can go to extremehealthradio.com/live and make some friends in the chat room.
I love it.
Yeah, listen to the shows and have some fun, right?
Yep. I'm always in the chat, so it's fun.
Cool. So today is Monday, October 2nd, 2014, and we have Matthew Stein on. And for those that don't know, for those that have been living under a rock, he's the author of When Technology Fails, a manual for self-reliance, sustainability, and surviving the long-term emergency, as well as When Disaster Strikes, a comprehensive guide to emergency planning and crisis survival. And he's an environmentalist, best-selling author, and get this, Kate, MIT-trained engineer.
Jeez.
Pretty cool, right? And he's a green builder, and he just an amazing guy.
I think he might know a thing or two.
I know, right?
More than we do.
And he's got a great website and does interviews. And recently he was on with George Norrie with Coast to Coast.
Nice.
Pretty
I love
cool.
George.
So, yeah, Matthew Stein, thank you so much, Matt, for being on the show today. Really appreciate it.
Wow, Justin and Kate, it's great that you have me on. I'm really looking forward to this.
Oh, so am I. So I saw on your Skype details that are you up in Truckee?
Yeah, I'm in... We had a cold, frosty night. There was slush freezing in my dog's water bowl outside in the deck. So it was kind of the first hard frost of the season. So.
I was going to say, if there's anybody that's perfectly equipped and living in the perfect place for the type of work you do, Truckee is a amazing place for the work you do, isn't it?
Well, it's a beautiful place. It's probably not if the world fell apart, it's not the best place to grow food. I must admit that. So
yeah, we go up there once a year on the way to Tahoe and pass right through, and
it's
beautiful.
Oh yeah, it is gorgeous.
I see it all the time in terms of the weather. It always seems to be one of the coldest places in the nation, right?
Well, it's a little misleading because it gets the record cold spot in the nation, record number of times from like April to October, because they get these clear nights and the heat radiates away and the cool air, no wind, and the cool air pools down in the valley. So you can have like an 85-degree day and a 35-degree night in the middle of summer, and it'll get the cold spot. But it's pretty rare that we get the nation's cold in the winter months. So, realistically, Californians like to say it's the coldest spot in the nation, but it's nothing like a Maine winter or Minnesota winter or a Montana or Wyoming winter. They've definitely got us beat for like really frigid cold winters.
Yeah, they have like the wind chill factor, don't they, too? It's makes it a lot colder.
Yeah, the sun comes out. We're in California, and we're kind of far south, so the sun comes out, and most days in the winter it gets above freezing in town. At least for a few minutes during the day. Not always, but most days.
Do you do a lot of or spend a lot of time out in the woods there and do some camping? And I'm sure you kind of test out a lot of your skills out there.
Yeah, I grew up hiking and skiing and climbing and in Vermont and New England, and my dad designed a couple of the AMC huts for the Appalachian Mountain Club. So when I got out of college, then I moved out west where the real mountains were, and so I spent a lot of time out there. I just did a really, really cool day where we canyoneered up the Tenaya Canyon from beneath Half Dome up to Tenaya Lake in the high country of Yosemite, and it was just awesome. We were scrambling up little cliffs and 1,000 feet of moderate low angle granite slabs, low enough, steep enough it got a little scary. No rope, like if you started tumbling you'd die. But our fearless leader Tom said, look, he'd lay himself down and said, look, if you do slip, just lay on the rock, and you're not gonna go anywhere. Whatever you do, don't tumble.
Oh my!
But it was awesome. Saw a little nice 3-foot rattler along the way. It was a great day.
Oh my gosh!
Unfortunately, at the end of the day, we got hit by a thunderstorm, and just as Tom warned, like, hey, there's some glacial polish on this granite here, then my buddy Dennis, Tom's older brother, slipped like 2 seconds later and snapped his wrist pretty badly. So we said he didn't really need to go all out and make it that much of an adventure for us. We could have done without the broken wrist, but we appreciated him like going the extra mile to give us the extreme adventure. So we had to splint him, and the dry slabs turned into the dry creek turned into a river about 30 feet wide and 4 or 5 inches deep, and so it was an interest. And we had hail and thunder and lightning and cold rain, so it was a very interesting day.
Wow.
Yeah, it was fun. It was a blast.
Well, for
except
you,
for
but
the broken wrist.
Yeah, I was gonna say for you and not for your friend.
Yeah.
So, how many hours was it from the time that he broke his wrist till you got to some care for that?
Well, it was about 2 hours till we got to the car, and we took the foam inner padding out of Tom's pack, slid out, and we padded his arm with one of my sweaters, and then wrapped a piece of stip foam around it, made a great splint. So it took us a couple of hours to get to the car, and then an hour and a half, 2 hours to get to his home, and then they had some dinner and took a break and pain pills, and then another couple hours to get to the ER in Fresno. So I think, the break happened about 4 p.m., and I think he was being dealt with in the ER about midnight. Okay. So, it was not a speedy process. So.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is something that I'm just really, really been a big fan of for a long time. Kate and I have talked a lot about this, how it's time now to start preparing and learning wilderness survival skills and things like that. And it's
it really is, because people talk about go bags and grab and run kits, and I've got a great article on your go bag and grab and run and emergency supplies. That's at my website, When Tech Fails, very information intensive under articles. But I also really encourage people to do some backcountry, start out with like car camping if you've never done stuff, then graduate to day hikes and graduate to like an overnight, because there's nothing like spending a couple nights out in the wilderness with everything in your back to realize the things that you brought that you didn't need to bring, that you never touched, and the things that you wished you'd brought. And, when things are not super critical, like you're just taking a weekend trip and you've got civilization nearby, a car and all that, that's the time to learn these skills, not when it's life and death situation and there's a huge crisis and you're running down the road and you realize, damn, I'm just not prepared. I don't know what I'm doing, and I brought all this stuff I didn't need, and now I'm stuck, and I really need certain things, and I didn't bring them along. Mm-hmm. So now's the time to work those things out. Like, for instance, in a crisis, what do you see? You see people walking down the road. If it wasn't a really big, if it's a big crisis, they're not driving their cars. There's no gas. There's no availability. They're not driving their cars. Mm-hmm. If it's not that big a crisis, you got your car. So, and what's the first thing that happens when most people who haven't been doing this walk down the road? Well, their shoes rub and their feet blister up. Mm-hmm. And once those blisters pop and start bleeding, you're going nowhere fast. So probably one of the most important things that I always have with me in the backcountry and in my go bag is a roll of 1.5-inch cloth first aid tape, adhesive tape, athletic tape. Because as soon as you feel those feet starting to burn and rub in the spot, then you whip those shoes and socks off and you take some of the tape off and use the sticky side to scrub the scummy oils and grease and slime off of your skin. And then you throw that in your pocket and you take some fresh tape out and tape those hot spots off, and you put your shoes and socks back on and you're down the stream. And mm-hmm. I once told this story online in an interview, and the guy interviewing me was a pretty hard guy, heavy-duty survivalist. He got like 70 guns in his gun collection. And he started laughing and said, well, this is really embarrassing. But a few years ago, I was backpacking in the Grand Canyon, and I blew my heels out. And I didn't have what you're telling me. I didn't have moleskin. I didn't have tape. I didn't have second skin. I didn't have anything. Wow. And my heels were just raw and bleeding. And they ended up calling a helicopter. And a helicopter showed up and said, boy, you better have a credit card. You better have a lot of credit left on it, because this is going to cost you. Now, I don't know about you, but I know my chances of getting a helicopter in a crisis to come and pick me up and take me somewhere is pretty much zero.
Right. Oh my gosh, I've heard some horror stories with in terms of that. Those helicopter survival rescues, they're tens of thousands, aren't they?
I don't know. I've never been on one.
Yeah, it's amazing.
And I hope to never be on one.
Well, I know an ambulance ride from here to the nearest hospital is 2 miles. It's like $6,000. So I can only imagine what a helicopter would be.
My ambulance ride, wife's ambulance ride into town, from 2 ambulance rides when she had multiple myeloma, and they said, "Oh, you got to have the ambulance, and you got insurance. We got approval." Well, then the insurance said, "Oh, we don't really approve that. The small print in your thing." It was like $4,000. Yeah, cash. And I owed for that. I'm still paying on it. And so imagine what a helicopter ride's going to run you. If just an ambulance ride for 20 minutes is a couple $1,000, what's a helicopter ride going to run you?
Wow. Yeah, that's definitely something to consider, before you go out and doing these types of things. Just make sure. I mean, think about what a silly little thing that is, just to get a blister and have your feet kind of torn up from a hike like that. I mean, that's so preventable.
Right, and then imagine now if you're in a life and death situation and you have to move and your feet are bleeding and you're in extreme agony, you're not going to move very fast if you can move at all. So, and that tape was extremely valuable when Dennis broke his wrist to tape the splint around his arm so that he could move. I mean, his wrist is just swinging in the breeze. I mean, if he hung it, it was just gone. It wasn't a crack. It was like, just swinging. Oh. It was bad.
Oh my goodness. Wow.
If you weren't there, are these the kind of friends that would have survived pretty well on their own, or is it always good to have somebody in the group like you?
We Every one of us could have dealt with that.
Okay.
Yeah, there's not a single one of we had a group of, Dennis, we had a group of 5, and there's not one of us that couldn't have dealt with that, even on their own. You know.
See, now that's really encouraging, because I feel like, I mean, myself included, I don't know anyone in our group of circle of family or friends that would know what to do in that kind of a situation. What do you think the percentage of people that actually could survive a major crisis and kind of know what to do is? Is it very, very slim, in your opinion?
Well, there's two. Knowing what to do and actually surviving are two different things.
Yeah.
A lot of people will survive in spite of not knowing what to do, that their innate human survival instinct will carry them through. The people who will know what to do and be well trained for it are probably in the, 5% of the population, 1 in 20 kind of range at most.
Yeah.
But a lot of us will muddle through it and make it through just because we've got, Mother Nature didn't make us to be helpless little human beings that the smallest thing was going to kill. Otherwise humans would have died off centuries ago. So There's built into each and every one of us an innate, strong, both an inner compass that helps us make critical decisions when we don't have enough information. That's the intuitive inner guide. And there's also a very strong survival instinct that, pulls you strongly. A lot of people say, in a situation like that, I'm just going to get a bullet and shoot myself. And it's like, well, the truth of the matter is that doesn't happen very often in crisis situations, that most people's inner drives them. They don't always survive, but they rarely give up and kill themselves. I mean, it is common in extreme situations like the Bataan Death March, like Nazi Holocaust, in the death camps, that friends will watch somebody just lose the will to live, and within hours to days they're gone. Once they've lost that, and they basically say, "I'm done." In fact, I had a climber. I did decades of extreme rock climbing, and I had a climber friend, pretty top-notch climber, and in Yosemite I'd gotten to know, and I saw him the next year, and he looked a little beaten down, and he told me that he and a buddy, which I also knew, had gone for a winter ascent of the Diamond. This is a high-altitude north face climb in Colorado, and it started out warm, and they were, dressed pretty warm, and the weather turned really bad. A huge storm came in, and it just got horrendous, driving winds and rain, and they were freezing, and they were cold, and at one point his buddy said, "I'm sorry, I'm done."
Really?
And he sat down and died.
Oh my gosh.
My friend had to leave him because no matter what he did, he couldn't get the guy. The guy said, I can't do it. He said, "Try to save yourself, but I just can't do it anymore. I'm spent. It's over." And that's the way it is. And sometimes it's really amazing in a survival situation that, the people you don't expect to survive do, and the ones you would expect to survive don't. And, like there was a crash in the Ecuadorian jungle when a plane got struck by lightning, and it went down. It broke up mid-flight, and this one girl, she was going to a graduation party that her mom was on the plane and with her sitting beside her, and the plane broke up mid-flight after being struck and starting a fire and explosion. And she remembers tumbling through the air strapped to her seat, and she crashed through the trees into the Amazon. And she found a few other people, but they were already dead. And then she ended up taking 11 days, this 16-year-old girl with one sandal and a miniskirt, and swimming in the rivers, and she remembered things her dad told her about, like the piranhas, like the shallow water, and they don't like fast-moving open water. So she was out in the middle of the river in the fast water, and she ended up finally finding a remote lumber camp. And she got in there and found some gasoline and poured it on her wounds, and she counted 30 maggots coming out of her wounds, and she poured the gasoline on it to burn the maggots out. And,
oh my gosh.
And her skin had 3rd-degree burns in the back, and almost magically, and this is the way the universe tends to work, the next day, the lumber guys showed up there, and they come there like once every 5 weeks or something. And they showed up the next day, and they took her. They rescued her. But she'd followed rules, like her dad had told her about the call of a certain bird meant there was bigger water. And even though she's following a little creek, she had the birds in a different direction. And ignoring her natural instinct to keep following the little creek was on, she cut cross country and listened to the birds and found the bigger water. So people do some amazing things in crisis situations, and that inner compass can really, really help. And it's pretty amazing. Now, I don't want to spend too much. I mean, it's a fascinating subject and topic, and I just gave a large talk at the Mother Earth News Conference on developing your inner survivor, developing the survival skills in the inner compass, and that's a great topic for a show. But I think Ebola is such a huge thing that we should move on to that topic before we run out of time.
Yeah, no, most definitely. I have this on my notes. You know what? Actually, this is a good time to take a break. So we'll cover that when we get back. But I did hear about that story that you're talking about. I think that was a couple years old, and just an incredible story.
The lady is my age now. So it's actually 40 years. But what happened was she had like the 40-year anniversary of it, and it did resurface in the news a couple years ago. Because there's a bunch of articles, and she was on TV, and she actually went back to the Amazon and visited the site. And in fact, I've got the picture in my presentation of her standing on top of the plane wreck in the middle of the jungle.
My gosh.
And her mom, it turned out, did live. Forensically, they figured out her mom was probably alive for like 10 days or so after the crash in a different spot. And she never found her mom, but her mom, I think, had broken her back and wouldn't have been able to get herself out. So it's pretty tragic. Yeah.
Wow, fascinating stuff. Yeah, maybe that's where I caught it a couple years ago. We're with Matt Stein, and his website if you're interested in checking him out, and his books too, When Disaster Strikes and When Technology Fails. I'd highly recommend both those books. You can check them out on whentechfails.com. Whoops,
there I am. I'll post that in the chat right now too. Don't mute me.
Oh my goodness. Okay, so we're with Matt Stein, and this is episode, 326?
You got it.
And we'll be right back right after this little break. I wanted to tell you about this really powerful and unique product called the Q Laser. Did you know there's over 2,500 peer-reviewed clinical research studies showing the benefits of low-level laser therapy on the body? We had Dr. Larry Lytle on episode 165 talking all about it. Dr. Lytle, what is the Q Laser?
The Q Laser is a light-delivering device, handheld, rechargeable, that is for lay people and professionals, that works at the cell level of the body to restore energy. Since the body is all composed of cells, and the cells are composed of atoms, it's good for any and everything in the body. It is especially beneficial for injuries. It will reduce swelling and inflammation before your eyes. Literally, you can have a sprained ankle and fly the laser, and within 30 minutes you can see that the swelling in the ankle has been reduced. Since all disease is inflammatory, you can assume that the same process is working if you have some type of intestinal problem. We have pictures of using a heat instrument to diagnose the intestinal inflammation. We can show that intestinal inflammation is pretty much gone within 3 minutes using the Q1000 laser. It's the number one tool in your medicine cabinet. I have a saying, never leave home without your laser. I have had 3 serious burns, and each time I had my laser with me, I applied the laser immediately after I had the burn. I never even blistered.
Kate and I don't want to be without ours. We've worked out a special deal with Dr. Lytle for all of our listeners. If you'd like to learn more about how the Q Laser can dramatically improve your health, go to extremehealthradio.com/laser. Are you living in the 21st century taking 19th century supplements? Vitamin C pills and powders are often destroyed in the digestive system and passed as waste, never reaching your depleted cells. Lipospheric vitamin C uses a patented encapsulation technology to deliver more without the stomach distress caused by pills and powders. Within minutes, liposomes filled with vitamin C are transported directly into your cells without binders, fillers, sugar, or GMOs. With all the modern advances of medicine and technology, are you throwing away money every morning on inefficient supplements? For under $1 a day, you could experience the power of lipospheric vitamin C. For a real eye-opener, visit extremehealthradio.com/vitamin C.
100% listener supported. Extreme Health Radio. Opening minds and transforming lives worldwide. Don't forget to join our thriving community for health tips, inspiration, and show updates at extremehealthradio.com/Facebook.
So, Kate, about a little while ago, maybe I'd say a little while ago. It's funny when you get older. You know, a couple weeks ago, a couple months ago is really 4 or 10 years ago. But as I say, a little while ago, I read, which was actually about 20 years ago.
Yesterday.
Yesterday. The other day. I read a book about the Ebola virus called The Hot Zone.
I remember that.
By Richard Preston. It was my first introduction to what Ebola was. Fascinating stuff. We're going to get into that right now with Matthew Stein. But this is episode 326, and we do broadcast live 4 days a week on Monday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday at 9 a.m. Pacific. If you want to join us at extremehealthradio.com/live. And as the lady just said, you can follow us on Facebook if you'd like to keep up to date with all of our shows, our archives, our upcoming shows, and everything that we're up to on Extreme Health Radio. And if there's anything that tickles your fancy, then you can click over and listen and join the show. Matthew, I want to talk a little bit about not the bird flu, but Ebola. It's a really, really big thing going on right now, isn't it?
Well, it's huge because they blew the chance to squash it when it was still in the villages. They've had a number of outbreaks. The first known outbreak being in 1976, where it got its name. Ebola came from that original first known outbreak. And the problem is, it's something that's so far has been a body fluid-borne disease, meaning that it's carried by the blood, it's carried by vomit, it's carried by mucus. Some say it may even be carried by sweat. And a couple of months ago, I started getting really concerned. My partner, my wife passed last year, and I have a new girlfriend, and she's a nurse practitioner who just spent 6 months at the VA, and she said, this Ebola thing is really scary because top doctors in Liberia are dying. This doctor, Humar Khan, Sheikh Humar Khan, he was one of the world's most renowned virologists with a specialty in Ebola. And so he is somebody who knows how to isolate it and treat it right. And he died. And the other top doctor in Liberia died. And his top nurse died, and there's been a couple of hundred healthcare workers who've caught it, including now 3 American healthcare workers who've gotten Ebola. And so it's something which is bloodborne, but she said, this is scary because here are people who know how to deal with isolation and treatment. Now, as a caveat, you could look at the picture of the JFK, quote, hospital in Liberia and say, oh my God, this hospital looks like a broken down service station in the middle of the worst part of East LA, where they work on cars. I mean, it doesn't look like a hospital.
Yeah.
So when you give that caveat, then you can say, okay, even though they knew what they're doing, they were probably severely overworked and severely undersupplied. Okay, so let's talk. So then I said, well, okay, let me look at some. When I started hearing her concerns, I mean, I was concerned too, but when she voiced this thing about, hey, these are people who know what they're doing and know how to treat Ebola, and they're still dying, and it's like, wow, this is scary.
Oh yeah. So
I thought, okay, let's look at some stats on other blood-borne viral illnesses. And you say, well, the first one we all know about, of course, is AIDS. That's a body fluid-borne. It's in semen and it's in blood. And I thought, okay, well, I looked up the stats on AIDS. Well, the incubation time for AIDS averages about 10 years. The incubation time for Ebola is 2 to 21 days.
Wow.
So that's a big difference. Then the transmission factors. Well, how easily is it transmitted? Well, lots of people have slept with partners with AIDS and not gotten it.
Right.
I mean, that's happened a lot. So it's not very easy to transmit it. Now, some people have the misfortune of sleeping once with someone with AIDS and getting it. I mean, it does happen. But there's plenty of people who have lived with and hung out with and slept with partners with AIDS and never gotten it. Mm-hmm. Now, okay, so let's look at the next one. And what's the numbers? 32 million worldwide. The AIDS epidemic has leveled off. They pretty much, it's not really growing. It's not really shrinking. It's fairly level right now. Okay, 32 million is a big number, but it's pretty level. So let's look at another bloodborne illness, viral hepatitis. And that's another body fluid. It's not just the blood. It's body fluid borne. And, well, what's the numbers there? It's like, oh, wow, that's really scary. There's 1 in 12 people in the world now living with chronic viral hepatitis.
Really?
Now, at least it's something you can live with. 1 in 12. That's over 500 million people in the world now have chronic viral hepatitis. So let's look at how infectious this is. So I thought, I've never heard, I'm sure it's happened, but I never heard of a healthcare worker, at least in this country, getting viral hepatitis from one of their patients. Mm-hmm. And so then I asked Mary, my partner, and I said, have you? And she said, no, I've never, not only have I never met a healthcare worker who's gotten viral hepatitis, I never heard of one in this country getting it from their patients. We're very careful and we don't do that. Mm-hmm. So then it's like, oh, that's pretty scary. There's 500 million people, 1 in 12 in the world now, living with chronic viral hepatitis. So let's look at another couple scary things about the Ebola. This guy in Dallas who got Ebola. Oh, no. Well, there's two people. The guy in Dallas who got Ebola. How did he get it? Well, he was renting in a house, and his landlord's family, they had the wife was really sick, and he rode in the front seat of a taxi when they brought the wife to the hospital. And then the wife, they turned her away because the hospital had no room and no beds and no treatment, which is happening all over Liberia. Mm-hmm. So he grabbed her feet while the husband grabbed her hands and carried her back into the taxi, and she died a couple hours later after getting home. So he had direct contact. So that's pretty bad. Now, the man who brought Ebola to Nigeria from Monrovia, which is the big city that has the Ebola epidemic in Liberia, a city of 1.5 million people with a giant slum called West Point and horrible sanitation and living, very tight living conditions, and, a lot of people living with very minimal sustenance, minimal food and a very poor diet there. And so it's like a place ripe for rampant Ebola, which it has now. Mm-hmm. So the man who brought Ebola to Nigeria, he flew to Nigeria to attend a business conference. He thought he just had flu. It turned out he had Ebola. The woman who helped him into a taxi, just short-term contact, gave him a hand, getting into a taxi, got Ebola. The woman in the hospital who stuck an IV in him before they knew it was Ebola, she got Ebola. I mean, this is just like casual contact, and they got it.
Well, they're talking about
limited, short contact.
Yeah, they're talking about, people say that you have to have direct contact, but they're talking about, airborne particles and things like that.
Well, it's possible, but the truth of the matter is, like, I saw a very dramatic video from a New York Times journalist, and he was going to a village where Ebola started. And see, there was sort of two tiers to this outbreak. It broke out in like 3 different villages, kind of in the border villages near the borders of Liberia and Guinea and Sierra Leone. Mm-hmm. And they sent World Health Organization and Doctors Without Borders and the French Médecins des Frontières, or I forget the exact way. Unless I see it in front of me, I don't remember the title. But the equivalent of Doctors Without Borders from France. And they worked, and it looked like they'd eradicated it. They had 35 days with no Ebola outbreaks. And the way they did it was isolating everybody. And this videographer went around, and he showed these it was like frozen in time. They went into like one mud hut and they showed a pair of jeans that had been washed and were hanging from the rafters blowing in the breeze, and sandals in front of the bed and dishes in the sink. And nobody touches anything. And there was 1 in 10 houses in this village were totally abandoned and nobody would touch anything because an entire families died of Ebola. And ones that got out and didn't come down with it, they were okay, and ones that got out and came down with it, spread it. So they thought, they basically, after these 3 villages, they thought they had nailed it, and they sent everyone home. Problem was that people, natural tendency is, I want to get out of Dodge. Ebola is happening, people are dying, I'm getting out of this town. And so a week after they sent everybody home, it showed up in 6 other villages. So people had left, it had incubated, and then and people were scared to say they had Ebola because then they're ostracized, they might starve, they might get no care, etc. And so it spread, and the fear of it and the not knowing what it was. And this was also, Ebola cropped up in an area of Africa where it had not been seen before. So people were not really ready for it and thinking about it. And it took them a while. It turned out that the first cases, in backtracking, instead of being the reported ones in March, they found the first cases was a little child that died in December. But, they tested and they thought maybe it was cholera or something else. And 5 people came out and they tested, and 2 tested positive for cholera, but they didn't respond to cholera. So it was quite a while. It was actually several months before they started realizing it was Ebola that was killing people. Because, it's just a small remote village and a few isolated deaths. And it took time because it wasn't in an area known for Ebola. So they weren't really looking for it.
It's wild. Now, so what is Ebola? Because when I read that book by Richard Preston, I remember him talking about how it essentially liquefies your organs and it turns everything into just a big bag of organs that have been essentially liquefied.
Yuck.
And it can, but it varies. It basically starts out as a flu. And that's part of the problem of diagnosing is, you get headachy, you get nauseous, you might have diarrhea, you're going to have a high temperature, you're going to feel like you got a really bad case of the flu. And then from there it progresses and it causes leaking of body fluids. Apparently, most people do not die from bleeding to death, but from internal leakage of fluids. Like in all of the organs start leaking fluids and including blood, and basically your pressure gets so low. And so one of the, in Nigeria, where they've been pretty successful at treating the Ebola and stopping it, they've held it to like 20 cases from the businessman that went to attend the conference, the entrepreneurs conference in Nigeria. He's the one who brought it from Liberia, from Monrovia. And he, apparently 20 different people he contacted got it, and they were very good about isolating and tracking down anyone he had contact with and watching them and telling them not to go out, and they appear to have squashed it. The problem is that it's now in the slums and it's now in the big cities. And it went to the city in, I forget the name of it, but the city in Nigeria is like 19 million people.
Whoa.
And they were able to jump on it so quickly that they appear to have stopped it from exploding like it did in Monrovia and Liberia, and like it's doing in Sierra Leone and in New Guinea. So
how are they jumping on it? Like, what does that look like?
Well, what it looks like is that they have people with isolation suits, and one of the reasons they were more equipped there was they had a Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation hospital where they were treating cholera and other, tropical diseases, where they had isolation suits, they had isolation units, and they had healthcare workers trained in that. So they were much better equipped than they were in Liberia, even though Liberia had Dr. Khan, Sheikh Khan, who was one of the world's foremost virologists, and he was one of the top Ebola people in the world, but he's now dead. But they didn't have great equipment, and Bill and Melinda Gates' place in this giant city in Nigeria did. And so they had the training and the equipment. So they immediately tracked everybody he was in contact with. They made sure that they didn't go out, that they had food brought to them, that they didn't have to go out for food or clothing or, any necessities of life. And they kept an eye on them, and they monitored their temperatures. And then if they did develop any kind of temperature, any symptoms, then they were immediately, put in total isolation. So basically they said anyone who was contacted said, you've got to stay home. You can't touch family members, wash your hands constantly, no contact with anybody around you. And then once they developed symptoms, then they were put in, dealt with people in basically moon suits and isolation units.
Would the people make it out of the isolation tanks, or they would basically die in there?
Well, they had because they had the equipment, because they had the isolation and the doctors, basically on a small level equal to what we have in the United States, they had a higher success rate. Instead of 70% dying, 60% died.
Okay.
So it's not a death sentence, if you get it. But it's, 70%, that's 7 out of 10 die. And because they had IV fluids and because they could keep them fed and they were watched and they were cared for, they had more like a 60% fatality rate instead of 70%. And that's what we can expect to see in this country with Ebola patients in this country is probably in the order of 50 to 60% until that point happens when the system starts getting overloaded and breaking down. And that's what I want to talk about next is the danger of, basically what you have now is you have a giant pool of Ebola in Africa. And you have a world, a global economy. Mm-hmm. And so that global economy, in order to keep moving, is going to keep funneling Ebola from that giant pool in Africa to the Western world. It's going to keep coming. We missed the chance to squash it. So it's going to take huge multinational effort to squash it now. It would have been a drop in the bucket to squash it then compared to what it's going to do to squash it now. So
let's talk
what's
a little
happening
bit,
though.
Let's talk a little bit about that. We're going to take a little break though. I want to talk a lot about that and a lot about some ways to prevent it. And,
there's a lot of chat.
Things to have on hand in the event that the system that all hell's breaking loose, people are freaking out, people are dying in the healthcare, like has happened in Africa. Healthcare workers are freaking out and going home because they don't want to kill their whole family and themselves because they brought the infection home. So that is a distinct possibility, and some might even say probability, in the American future. And there are things to have on hand that I can't promise will heal Ebola, but I can tell you stand a really good chance of doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
let's get into
people
that.
really want to know that. So.
Yes, okay. This is an awesome show. This is episode 326 with Matthew Stein. And if you want to check out his website, it's mattstein.com. And he's got a bunch of different websites, which we will link up to on this particular show page, which is extremehealthradio.com/326. And we'll be right back right after this break. I have to say, I have been absolutely loving this product by Tristan Truscott and Peter Ragnar called Good Morning, Good Evening Qigong. If you want to listen to the interview we did with Tristan, you can go to extremehealthradio.com/127. And Qigong is a great way to de-stress the body. And as you know, there's a huge component to disease caused by stress. And stress is a huge factor in how we live our lives and the amount of energy we have and the amount of vitality we have. And so, Dr. Shade, what do you think about Qigong?
People come to me and they're really sick and they got this blown out neurological system and all this toxicity. And I tell them, you need to do Qigong, Tai Chi. You need to do these things that settle down and restore your neurology, because it puts together all the parts. It puts you back into that state where you can start to detoxify. And so I highly, highly recommend all that.
And what about you, Kit Campbell? What do you think about Qigong? Do you like it as well?
Qigong is amazing. And the reason that I believe it to be amazing is everything here is energy. That is a scientific fact, if there ever is one. So when you're practicing Qigong, you're actually drawing energy into your body. Your intention, whatever your intention is behind any action, will determine the level of energy, type of energy that you absorb into your body. So your intention behind is very important, just like thought. So when you're practicing Qigong, you're actually bringing energy in and you're bringing out the stuff that might be a bit stale. With Tai Chi, it's totally different. The energy runs underneath the skin because it's more of a martial. This is the Chinese understanding, by the way. It's more of a martial art. So Qigong is very, very good for bringing that energy into the body, and just fantastic.
If you're interested in picking up this Qigong course by Tristan Truscott and Peter Ragnar, go to extremehealthradio.com/Qigong. That's QIGONG. And you can learn more about it. There's a great video on that page, and you can learn more about it on that page. And I highly, highly recommend this product. I love it myself, so go ahead and check that out. extremehealthradio.com/Qigong. Feel younger and feel healthier. Harness the power of the sea through S&C, delivering you whole body wellness. S&C supplements are specifically formulated using active sea-based minerals at levels that correspond directly to the nutritional makeup of the human body. The unique and original S&C product line is enhanced by the legendary Dr. Ron Kusan's proprietary processing technology, increasing the efficiency and speed of nutrient delivery into our system. Achieve optimal hydration and mineral balance, decalcify the body to provide rapid relief from chronic diseases and ailments like inflammation and digestive dysfunctions. SNC is a life-restoring solution to ensure optimal health and wellness. Visit extremehealthradio.com/C, SEA today, and discover the secret to eternal youth. If you enter the coupon code JUSTIN, JUSTIN, you'll get a 20% discount on all orders for limited time. So why wait to be well? Go to extremehealthradio.com/C.
All free shows, all the time, on Extreme Health Radio. Opening minds and transforming lives worldwide. Join our community today. Sign up to our email list and instantly get our free gift to you, along with loads of inspirational content and cutting-edge tips to help change your life at extremehealthradio.com/subscribe.
Okay, this is a very, very important show, I believe, right, Kate?
Oh my gosh.
Very important.
Important for the world, especially very important to all the chatters in the chat room that live in the Dallas area.
Yep.
There's a lot of concern going on.
A lot of concern going on. This is extremehealthradio.com, episode 326. So we will put links to everything that we talked about, all of Matt's books, all of his websites and everything on episode 326, this show page. And just to let you guys know, we have, actually we're taking next week off, but the week after that, we're going to have Bill Henderson on talking about natural cancer treatments.
Nice.
And Bill Henke talking about pranic healing and energetic healing,
which we've experienced, and that's been quite fascinating.
We spent some time with him. Actually, I think he's going to come in the studio.
Yeah, he is. It'll be good.
And then you're going to get to meet our dentist for the second time, Dr. Stuart Nunley.
Yay.
And we'll be able to talk about natural healing and holistic dentistry. So the best way to keep up to date with all of our shows is to sign up to our newsletter. If you guys want to get these weekly show recaps sent to you via email every Sunday. And so you can sign up to our newsletter list. And we also send you a free ebook called Lessons from the Miracle Doctors, which sells for $20 on Amazon, with tons and tons of natural healing protocols in that book. And we give it to you for free if you sign up to our newsletter. It gets sent to you right away. So you can do that if you're interested in signing up to our newsletter. And so, Kate, we had a ton of questions, right, in the chat room?
Yeah. Well, we do, but it's basically like they obviously want to end on a little bit of a high note as far as if we're all in doomsday or if there's some preventative natural stuff we can even have a chance at. But
yeah, so let me talk just real quick on a couple of very important points before I get into what you need to, what can fight Ebola.
Please.
What you can do alternative that can fight Ebola or stands a good chance of it. I can't promise anything will, and I'm not a doctor, and I'm just sharing information with you, so I'm not prescribing. And apparently the FDA is suing people now who are claiming that something heals Ebola. So, I can't claim anything like that. Right. They're shutting people down. So the first part of this is, they said that the Ebola epidemic is exponential growth in Liberia. And so what does that mean? Well, World Health Organization, on September 1st, said that in the prior 3 weeks they'd seen a doubling of new Ebola cases in Liberia. And then on September 14th, they said that in the prior week they'd seen a doubling of Liberia cases in a single week. And but let's assume, and then I've seen it reported that it's a month. So let's assume that the 3-week doubling is reasonably accurate. And that's basically, they're saying that if we don't, it's growing faster than world efforts to squash it are growing. In other words, they're putting a lot of money and a lot of people in there now, but it's actually growing much faster than the efforts to squash it. So if it continued doubling at a rate of once every 3 weeks, starting with 4,000 cases, now it's like 7,000, but starting with 4,000 in the beginning of September, if you doubled that every 3 weeks, that would mean every man, woman, and child on the planet Earth is infected in 15 months' time. That's less than a year and a half from now. It would spread throughout the planet, basically to everybody. Now, I'm not saying it's going to continue doubling at that rate, but that's what exponential growth means. Pretty scary stuff. Now, then they say the doctors assure everybody that in the United States that we have the ability to treat Ebola and isolate it and stomp it out. And you could say that there's a very good argument for that, given that Nigeria appears to have contained the outbreak to just 20 cases in Nigeria by doing the right thing. And you would hope that if Nigeria can do it, that we can too. Now, the double-edged sword there is that it takes about 25 healthcare workers in the United States to care for a single Ebola patient properly. So if you've got 10 or 50 or 100 cases of Ebola in the United States, we can deal with that.
Right.
We've got the isolation units, we've got the workers to do with it. If you have 1,000, it breaks down. And to support that, I have a New York Times article right now saying outbreak of a respiratory illness escalates amongst children and mystifies scientists. And this is on September 25th, and this is the E68 virus, enterovirus 68, which is causing extreme respiratory distress. They said, like from August 18th to September 24, roughly 3,600 children were treated at emergency and urgent care facilities in Children's Hospital in Colorado. Not all of them had the E68. Very, very few of them were diagnosed with it. You can assume a significant number had it, but it's an unknown number. And they said roughly 10% were hospitalized because they needed continuous breathing treatment, supplemental oxygen, or even to be placed on a ventilator.
Wow.
So this hospital's had a, quote, bed crunch and is struggling to maintain supplies. So this is one hospital. In Chicago, University of Chicago Medicine Cummer Children's Hospital had to divert ambulances to other hospitals because its emergency room was filled with children, most of them under 5 years old, with severe respiratory illness. Before this outbreak, the hospital had not had to divert ambulances in 10 years. So here is a virus right now that's going, quote, viral in the United States, not deadly like Ebola. So far, one child has died, but serious. And it's taxing the system's ability to keep up and deal with it. So you can imagine now, if Ebola gets out of that 10, 50, or 100 scenario and starts multiplying in inner cities in America, what situation we're going to be in. So now let's talk about what you need to know, do, and have on hand in case that dreaded day ever comes, and I hope and pray it never comes. Okay, so I'm going to read down briefly my top 10 list out of the chapter Staying Healthy in a Crisis or Pandemic and When Disaster Strikes. And When Technology Fails is a giant encyclopedic book that covers sustainability, self-reliance, and surviving the long emergency. It has a huge chapter on alternative healing and herbs called When High-Tech Medicine Fails. When Disaster Strikes is more like a much smaller, more condensed, more concise book specifically on emergency prepping and crisis survival.
Okay.
And so it doesn't include sustainability. It doesn't include how do you do 17th century technologies if the world falls apart. I'd much rather fall back to the lifestyles of Abraham Lincoln and George Washington and Thomas Jefferson than caveman days. And so When Tech Fails kind of is the best of the modern world and the old world. It's a massive encyclopedic book.
Okay.
When Disaster Strikes is just prepping and survival. Okay, so here's the top 10 list. And I'm going to go through it briefly, and then I'm going to talk to some specific ones that I feel are extremely valuable in the event of Ebola. Okay, so number one, and I'm sure many of your listeners are familiar with several, if not all of these, is MMS, Miracle Mineral Solutions. That is a solution you can make, and I strongly recommend you buy the raw ingredients to make it. I have instructions to make it in my book. You can find them on the internet. Jim Humble, a chemist working in the jungles, doing gold mining, found it and developed. He developed it from some other supplements that originally to fight malaria. It's credited with over 100,000 two-day cures for pennies to wipe out, to heal people with malaria. And it's been used for a huge variety of things. Many people call it a panacea. I don't think anything is a panacea. Nothing is good in all situations. In the test tube, it's very effective against Ebola. As far as I know, I'm sure there's somebody in Africa using it, but I have no data on it. I can't tell you that it works on Ebola in the body. The raw ingredients are sodium chlorite, which is a chemical you can use for pool disinfection, and citric acid as an activator. And there's very specific instructions and protocols for how to use it. Number two, a colloidal silver generator for making homemade colloidal silver solutions. And it's a good idea to keep a nebulizer on hand for inhaling colloidal silver mist when you're dealing with lung infections. I do not know any data. I know there's tons of data indicating that colloidal silvers in all forms are very effective against pathogenic bacteria. I don't know of data in their effectiveness against viruses, but I do know, for instance, in the Spanish flu that killed an estimated 50 to 100 million people worldwide in 1918 through 1919, many more people died from the flu than World War I and II put together, that it was not just the initial infection, but the secondary bacterial infections. In other words, the initial infection was a flu virus, but what killed people often was it opened them up to secondary pneumonia infections, and many people died from that. And I do know that the colloidal silver is very good against that, especially with a nebulizer. Now, I'll talk about another silver product that has been proven against viruses in a minute, but I'm just going down the list. The next thing is grapefruit seed extract, GSE, which has strong antiviral, antifungal, and antibacterial properties. You can get it at most health food stores. You're probably familiar with that one. Grapefruit seed extract, also known as GSE. The fourth one, and this is a huge one in the Ebola, in your Ebola bag of tricks, is a blood electrifier from the Beck Protocol. Now, are you guys familiar with that at all?
Yeah, we actually have. Are you talking about like the zapping technology?
No, it's not a zapper.
Okay.
It's very different from the zapper. Hulda Clark zapper, some people rave about it. Other people claim that there's not much data that shows it actually works. Bob Beck is the man who brought the modern colloidal silver generator to the world. And he was a physicist and scientist, and he invented the electronic flashbulb when he was a teenager and patented it. And he sold it for what he thought was a huge amount of money in those days. This is like the late 20s or something like that, kind of like Depression days. He sold it for like $1,000, and it paid for his last year of undergraduate school for his physics degree. The man who bought it from him made $25 million off of it, and prior to that, flashes were done with flash powder, and you'd have to do a spark, and it was dangerous, and it blew up and caused fires and burned people and all that. And he developed the modern electronic flashbulb. Now, when he was in his mid-40s, his health was failing, and the doctor said, hey, you've had a sedentary lifestyle and terrible diet, no exercise. And, some people just age sooner than others, and sorry about that, Dr. Beck, but, you're in that case. And, sorry, Charlie. And he said, well, I've been on the board of all these companies. I've developed medical devices for major medical corporations, and I'm not just going to take this lying down. So he poured through research and books, and he came up with several different little devices in a protocol that he used to improve his own health, and people have used to help themselves recover from things like AIDS, hepatitis C, and a body fluid-borne, deadly, not as deadly as Ebola, but often deadly virus. Mm-hmm. And they've had very good results with the Beck Protocol. So he did not invent the basic things. He invented the instruments to apply scientific research from others. So one of the things he found was he came across a patent from the Albert Einstein University in New York City for a device that would run a certain low voltage, high frequency signal, electrical signal through blood, and it was found that that signal killed all pathogenic bacteria and viruses in the blood. And this device was a patent for a device to take the blood out and electrify it and then recirculate it back in the body, kind of like a kidney dialysis machine or some of the new ultraviolet blood machines. But what Bob Beck thought was, I bet that I could do the same thing with electrodes strapped to your wrist, doing it right through your skin. So you wouldn't have to break the skin. You wouldn't need an expensive device. You wouldn't need a professional healthcare worker or anything. You just sit down and watch TV and electrify your blood through the skin.
And you don't even have to extract the blood from the body either.
You don't extract the blood.
Yeah.
It's mildly uncomfortable. You turn the dial on the device until you feel kind of like, okay, that's as high as I want to go. It's like it feels really weird.
Right.
And you sit down and you watch TV or read a book for a half hour. And people who do dark field photography, blood diagnosis, looking at things floating in the blood, they'll see that the average person in America will have a lot of misshapen blood cells and a lot of really weird crystalline things that they tell me are viruses floating in the blood. And you do the Beck Protocol, and the electrification is just one of 4 arms of the Beck Protocol. And a month or two later, you look at the blood under the screen, and everything is perfect. There's like no weird crystalline things floating in the blood. There's no misshapen cells. Everything looks perfect. Everything looks fine. And people claim, this is anecdotal evidence, no scientific evidence. It's not patented. There's no money in it, so there's no $20 to $100 million to run it through the FDA. So, unless some Bill Gates or someone decides they want to run it through the FDA, it just isn't going to happen. But it is, if you go to bobbeck.com, BOBBECK.com, or sharinghealth.com, you can read the testimonials. Now, you can buy the instruments from SOTA, SOTA.com, but they can't tell. They can tell you, they can direct you to the other sites for information. It's basically sold as an instrument that helps your general sense of health and well-being. It can't be. They cannot tell you it heals anything, and they cannot prescribe it for anything, or they will be shut down.
They got to really walk the line when it comes to that kind of stuff.
That's correct. Yeah. But now the other thing, so the silver pulsar from SOTA does 2 things. It has you strap it to silver wires in a jar of water, and you make homemade ionic and colloidal silver. And you pull the plug out and you put a different set of electrodes in, and you strap them to your wrist with some moistened little cloth sleeves over the electrodes, and you electrify your blood through your wrist. So it does. So 2 of the Beck Protocol device are done in a single device. And now Bob Beck realized that there's parts of the body where microelectric currents don't get to. The blood is not everything in the body. So the lymph system is totally different from the blood system.
Right.
So he realized that people, another aspect was to induce these microelectric currents in the lymph nodes, and he developed a magnetic pulsar that does an extremely high magnetic pulse. You hold it against different parts of your body, different organs and different lymph nodes, and it'll induce, right directly underneath that head, it'll induce these microelectric currents that tend to kill the parasites and the bacteria and the viruses, in the direct vicinity of that.
These things would be, sorry, Matt, these things would be great just for people with families and, just to have around the house anyway.
I highly recommend you have them. And Bob Beck told the world how to make them. So if you're handy and you don't have the money and you like to do electronic gadgetry, you can find the circuits online and make them yourself, or you can buy them. A variety of people make them. I just know that Russ and his wife at Soda Instruments, their backstory is his wife had been suffering from chronic fatigue syndrome for 3 years. She put on 70 pounds. She slept 14 hours a day. She couldn't do the laundry. She couldn't shop. She was a wreck. She was feeling depressed and suicidal. And they heard that Bob Beck was giving a talk in Vancouver. So they got in the car and drove to Vancouver, and he's an electrical engineer, and he met with Beck, and Beck gave him the circuit diagrams, and he went home and built the stuff, and he used it with his wife, and in 1 month's time she felt significantly improved, and in 3 months' time she was back to herself, totally healed. And they were like, wow, this is great. So they just started sharing with the world, and being an electrical engineer and knowing Beck directly, they worked together to refine things, and so I just know that you're getting quality stuff if you buy soda. It doesn't mean other people aren't making the exact same thing.
Mm-hmm.
I just don't know those people. I know these people.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Now, the last arm of it was people complained there's something called the Herxheimer reaction. When you start killing off all of this bacteria and viruses that grow in your body, their dead bodies become toxic waste. And people who are sick and their blood isn't flowing well, it's not very oxygenated, and they have a hard time dealing with the toxic waste of the die-off from the stuff that's been living in their body that's being killed by the Beck Protocol. So people start feeling flu-like symptoms, headachy, nauseous, slight fever, all of that. So Bob Beck found that when you drank freshly ozonated water, that's an O3 instead of an O2 molecule, that the O3 is extremely unstable. It's very good for purifying water, but also if you use a little blood oxygen sensor on your fingertip, a little paper, big kind of clippy thing that goes on your fingertip, if you pound down like a quart of freshly ozonated water or a couple cups, you'll see an immediate spike in your blood oxygen level in your body. And that extra oxygen in the blood helps the body detoxify this toxic waste that's being produced because the Beck Protocol is killing these organisms that have been living within your body.
Okay.
And so that's the fourth arm to the Beck Protocol. Okay. So let me go down. There's a few more things I need to get to real quick in the list. I know we've run over quite a bit. The next one is elderberry extract. The Israelis found that in their research that elderberry is extremely effective against viruses, even more effective than Tamiflu. And so they developed an extract, and they call it Sambucol. So you can get various things, but they actually have a medicine from Israel called Sambucol available in health food stores, or you can get various elderberry extracts. Elderberry is sometimes referred to as the medicine chest of the hill people. I would definitely, in the event of Ebola, stock up on that. Splanthus usnea, it's a good broadband antifungal, antibacterial, not so sure. It's great for your alternative medicine chest. You can take it orally or you can use it topically. Whether it would be effective in Ebola, I have no clue. Next one is a multi-remedy homeopathic medicine kit. Again, I have no clue if it's going to be effective against Ebola, but in the Spanish flu epidemic of 1918, 1919, they found that in the hospitalized people in regular hospitals, once people got sick enough to go to the hospital, they had about a 1 in 3 fatality rate, pretty significant. And yet in homeopathic hospitals, they had a 3%, 1/10 the fatality rate of the regular hospitals. And it turned out that there was a homeopathic remedy made from a duck liver that stimulated an immune response in the body that was extremely effective against the Spanish flu virus. And in analyzing the Spanish flu virus, it turns out, taking samples that were preserved in wax from people who died in the epidemic, modern DNA sampling indicates that the Spanish flu virus was originally a bird flu that mutated into a swine flu that mutated into a human flu. And it's quite similar in genetic respect to the recent Mexican flu that was quite serious, but naturally there's a lot of immunity around the world now from the Spanish flu virus, and so it wasn't nearly as difficult this time around as the Mexican flu virus as it was in 1918, 1919 when the immunity wasn't there. And some people say Ebola was developed in a lab. because it's been part of the bioweapons program in the Soviet Union and in the United States.
Yeah, we've heard that.
But the fact is that there's roughly 10% of the population in areas of Africa have a natural resistance to it and antibodies to it. So it indicates that it's probably been in remote villages and in remote parts of the jungle in Africa for a long time, and it just kind of comes and goes, and people would get killed from it and they'd freak out and they'd isolate themselves from the ones, and they would take care of it by just being cautious. And it never really got to the major population centers until this recent outbreak. So my indication is that Ebola is not airborne, because when they do the right things, they are able to isolate it in the villages. They've been pretty successful in Nigeria. And so it indicates that, but it is extremely contagious in terms of body fluids. Far more so than in my opinion, I'm not an expert, but in my opinion, from just looking at the data, far more contagious than hepatitis C and B, viral hepatitis, now in 1 in 10 or 1 in 12 in the world now have that, and certainly way, way more contagious than AIDS. So it's something really big to worry about. Now, the next item in my kit, and this is extremely critical in the event of Ebola, is ASAP, which is it also under the trade name of Silver Biotics. That's a patented nano silver solution that's made under a patented high voltage process that does make some kind. They've spent a lot of money, I think well over $1 million, trying to figure out what made this so special, and then developed a patent around it. And originally they developed the stuff because they had a gold mine in Utah, a silver mine in Utah, and offshore silver had depressed the price of silver to the point where it was costing them money. They were shipping dollars out the door with every pound of silver they sold. So they started looking into alternates to keep their people working, to keep their employees working, and keep the doors open. And they'd started working on silver solutions with modern MRSA, methicillin-resistant staph infections, and antibiotic-resistant bacteria. So they developed this process, and then they started saying something's different about this. It's much more effective than normal silver. And they spent a lot of money in high energy physics figuring it out. And not being a physicist, and it's been too long since I heard the explanation, but it has something to do with the energy shells and things moving back and forth in a special form of the nano silver that makes it much more bioavailable and much more effective. So in fact, they paid a National Institutes for Health lab at Utah State University, I think it's in Ogden, Utah, to do a viral challenge with the most deadly known strain of bird flu virus, not Ebola. This is bird flu, back when the bird flu scare was happening.
Right.
And unbeknownst to them, the doctor in charge of the lab had just recently read an FDA paper denigrating colloidal and ionic silvers and saying that not only did they do nothing, they were also toxic. So this guy heading the lab did triple what he was paid to do, and his intention was to show that this stuff didn't work and that it was toxic and to shut them down. And instead, he found the toxicity level was extremely low. You basically have to drink a swimming pool of the stuff. It was far less than an aspirin, for instance, and far less than almost any pharmaceutical on the market. And it was extremely effective against bird flu virus. He didn't test it on multiple viruses, but on bird flu, which is a 70% fatal strain. And the way they did this, they had a control group, and they would inject a deadly dose of bird flu directly into the lungs of squirrels, of rodents. And then they would inject the same into the lungs of squirrels, but also give them the 10 part per million nanosilver solution, and they found that they had a 100% fatality rate in the control group and only a 20% fatality rate in the treated group. Now, 20% is still pretty bad, but realize that they were directly injecting a lethal dose right into the lungs, which doesn't happen. I mean, you're not going to have somebody directly inject a lethal dose of Ebola into your lungs. So
Right.
they also found in tests in different clinical trials that these silvers worked synergistically with antibiotics, that there was no harmful contraindications, and that the antibiotics became more effective and the silvers more effective in combination. And in some cases, they were like a 1 + 1 = 2. In other cases, it was like a 1 + 1 = 3. So in some cases, it was synergistic where they worked together. They worked far better than the sum of the both. And in other cases, it was more like just an adding, adding together. You add this and you add that, and it works better with both of them. But no contraindications. So this is something I would really get on hand. It's made by American Biotech Labs. You can buy it discounted at Vitacost.com. You can also get it at GNC Live. They do private label for various other people, and so there are other nanosilvers in the market under different names made by the same people. I don't know which private label they make. There may be other nanosilvers that work equally well that do exactly the same thing. I just can't speak for them. I just don't know. I can't say, I don't have the data in front of me to say, yeah, this other stuff is great. It may be great, and they may have great data on it. I'm not trying to tell you that this is the only one that works. I'm just telling you it's one that has some good science and good data behind it.
Right. And what's so great about silver is that there's so many different ways to take it. Kay, I think you wanted to...
Oh, I blanked on, what was the first name of that, Matt? American something?
Oh, American Biotech Labs.
Thank you.
Also known as ABL.
Gotcha.
And the two trade names they sell stuff under that I know is theirs and not a private label is Silver Biotics, Biotics, and ASAP, ASAP. And I've used their ASAP gel on rare occasions. I get cold sores. That's the herpes 1 virus. And, I usually when I sunburn my lips, being at high altitude in the high Sierras in the mountains, rock climbing or skiing or something, and then I feel like a thickening in the lip and the sign of a cold sore coming on. And in the past, I tried various over-the-counter remedies, and herbal remedies, and none of them worked. Now, I'll admit I haven't taken acyclovir, which is the pharmaceutical, prescription-only pharmaceutical de rigueur. That's the one, Valtrex and acyclovir. And so I can't say how well they would have worked, but the ASAP gel, if I dab it on, 5 or 6 times during the day, nails it. The thickening goes away, it disappears, I never get a cold sore. And so clearly, it's not only as effective against bird flu, but clearly it's effective against the herpes virus. I'm putting it on that, and it's going through my skin, and it's deactivating the virus. So, is it effective against Ebola? I can't tell you it is, but do I have a bunch in case of Ebola? I can tell you yes.
Yeah, a lot of what you're talking about is so great because it's preparation in your physical life, in your physical existence, in terms of getting some of these things around you, bringing them into your house, and doing all this kind of stuff. But it's also really beneficial, and I'm sure you do this, is keeping yourself healthy as well, so that
I take a whole bunch of herbal supplements and a few vitamins and a lot of supplements and some superfoods every day. And I exercise, and I haven't done a cleansing fast in a long time, but it's on my list to get around to again. And
it all goes
I've deparasited myself and used the Hulda Clark Zapper, kidney cleanse, liver cleanses. Not like I'm fanatic about doing this every day of the week. This is like I don't do enough of it probably. But I mean the supplements and superfoods I do every day. And the exercise I do almost every day, probably about 5 days a week, cardiovascular. And so, yeah, I mean, I'm 57 and I'm really healthy. I'm almost never sick. But, I try to treat myself right. Now, certainly the last big thing on your list you should have is N95 surgical masks, N95 like painter's masks with replaceable carbon canisters that have the seal. That's like what you see people go into painters' booths and stuff. You want to have a good stock of rubber gloves, rubber boots, and clothing. Like if you can get a Chem Bio suit and some bottles of bleach to have on hand. Most of us can't afford to stock a whole bunch of PPEs, personal protection equipment that is throwaway. We just don't have the money for it. But if you can get maybe 1 or 2 throwaway items, and certainly throw away masks and certainly throw away gloves, but also get something. Like I saw a wonderful article by Mary Odom about our healthcare system and how it can only handle so much before it starts falling apart, and then you'll have to go back to and it has a picture, back to the way things are doing it in Africa, and has a picture of like a field with wooden stakes in the ground and rubber gloves and rubber jackets and rubber boots drying on these wooden stakes. And what they're doing is, they're having to reuse stuff and wash them in Clorox bleach solutions and reuse them. And they have like a pan of Clorox bleach, but when they go in and out of rooms, not 100% bleach, I think they do like a half a cup of bleach per gallon, which is way more than what you could drink. I mean, this is like disinfection solution, not drinking solution. Drinking solution is like 5 to 10 drops per quart.
Right.
But then it has a dwell time of a half hour in warm water, an hour in chilly water, 2 hours in cold water, and 4 hours in ice cold water. So you need a way stronger solution than that to just dip your boots in and out or wash your hands off. Mm-hmm. And so, they step in and out of rooms and they wash their hands in these solutions and they wash their boots and feet as they go in and out of rooms. They're very careful, but, they're doing it the more low-tech way, and that's what's going to be available to you and I. Most of us won't be able to have a bundle of throwaway PPE suits that we can put on and off just in case.
And do you talk about?
We may like to.
Do you talk about where people can get all this stuff in your book?
I do. You can get a lot of this through any kind of safety supply house.
Okay.
You can get a lot of that. You can go Google a safety supply house, see one's new. And I have a resource guide in the back. I have a resource guide in each chapter of When Technology Fails, a major one. And then I have a guide in the back in the appendices in the back of When Disaster Strikes. So, for instance, approved gas masks, AGM, approvedgasmasks.com. They have whole bunch stock of in-stock gas masks, protective clothing, hazmat supplies, NBC kits. NBC is nerve biochemical kits, nuclear biochemical. Basically, those are like the real big, the moon suits. You can get the moon suits there. And so I have a whole list of, I have like survival supplies, guns, ammo, all that kind of stuff in the appendices in the back of When Disaster Strikes, and then each chapter has an appendix on the subject covered by the chapter in When Technology Fails. So, huge references in both, and there's overlap between the books, but there's like a third of When Disaster Strikes is copied and slightly edited material from When Technology Fails, and 2/3 is brand new. So there's overlap, and a lot of the illustrations were. Most of the illustrations in When Disaster Strikes came from When Technology Fails, but 2/3 of it was all written all new. So they're overlap, but they're not the same.
I love it. Such great resources.
My gosh.
Yeah, thanks for spending some time with us, Matthew. This is awesome.
You're welcome. I'm anything to help out, and I'm hoping it doesn't spread around. But the chances are, the good news is like SARS was airborne. And it broke out in China. And what happened immediately there was a bunch of really rich Chinese businessmen saw that it was just going to kill business in the country and shut everything down. And they jumped up and donated like billions of dollars. And they had the fever police. They had thermal imaging screens set up in all public places and in airports and train stations and stuff, and they had people watching. And when they noted somebody on the thermal imaging screens that were a couple degrees hotter than other people, then armed guards in moon suits came out and escorted them away into locked isolation units.
Wow.
And they stomped it out. But that's unfortunately the level, if it gets a toehold in America, that's the level of control that's required to stomp it out. And so we're, the days of traveling freely around the planet may be extremely numbered right now. And certainly you don't want to be one of those victims where you didn't have the bag of tricks on hand and you thought you just, went to the gymnasium and came home a couple days later. Typically 6 to 10 days later, people develop symptoms, sometimes as early as 2 days, and you think you just got this nasty flu, and it turns out Ebola. And by the time you realize Ebola, it's infected the people in your family, and it's infected your neighbors, and the taxi, you rode in a taxi, and it infected people who helped you in the taxi. It can get a toehold in America that rapidly, that quickly, that easily. And suddenly, if it's in a village, it's easy to track who you touched and came in contact with. Try to figure out who you touched and contacted in New York City or in East LA or in any major city in this country. Try to figure out who you came in contact with in the last 4 or 5 days when you just thought you were starting to come down with a little flu and it turned out to be Ebola.
It's impossible.
Yeah,
it's completely impossible. Wow.
Well, knock on wood, we don't have to deal with that, and we have some really great moon suits for Halloween costumes one year.
That's true.
I hope that's the case. I hope I have a couple of moon suits, and I only get to use them on Halloween. I really like that. Thank you for that cheery thought. And it's like car insurance, It's like nobody buys car insurance and says, damn, I didn't get into a wreck, and I blew that money on car insurance. It's like, you ever heard anyone make that complaint?
I know, right? Yeah, no, it's so true. It's
you got to end on a high note, right?
Yeah.
All right. So here's my motto. I ask everyone to do their best to change the world and do your best to be ready for the changes in the world. And thank you so much for having me on today.
You're so welcome.
Thank you, Matt.
Hang on the line right there, Matt. We're going to do a little closeout for our live show. And thank you, everybody, for joining us in the live chat room. It's been a ton of fun. A lot of people sharing some great information, links, and different ideas, and asking questions and corresponding with each other. Really appreciate all you guys listening live. It's just so much fun to have you guys on here. And we'll post the podcast version of this show as soon as we possibly can. We have an appointment with Dr. Bergman today, so we're going to go up there and take
And when we have our moon suits in stock, we'll be Instagramming ourselves wearing them.
That would be funny. That'd be great.
I want a moon suit now.
So I want to thank everybody for joining us. Make sure to check us out tomorrow. We'll be on our Free for All Friday show at 9 a.m. Pacific if you guys want to join that show, and we'll be there tomorrow. So thank you, everybody, for joining us on the live show. We'll catch you on the next episode.
Okay.
Oh,
thanks,
Matt,
guys.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Matt. That was awesome.
Much appreciated. It was a pleasure. Go out and have a great day.
Okay, thanks, Matt.
Thank you. You as well.
All right.
Bye.
All right. Well, that was an awesome show with Matt Stein, wasn't it?
I still want a moon suit.
There's a ton of links on these shows, so we're going to put everything we possibly can into this particular show page. But we're going to be right back. We're going to take a little bit of a break, and we're going to be right back and talk about a lot of his points that he talked about with the Ebola stuff. Really
awesome.
Really good stuff. All right, so hang tight, and we'll be right back right after this. I have been a huge fan of rebounding for many, many years, and if you want to get in great cardiovascular shape, tone your legs, back, and butt, and stomach, as well as cleanse your lymphatic system from toxins and chemicals, you just have to start rebounding. It's imperative. And not only will it create endorphins that quickly become addictive to you, but it's very low impact as well. It helps to prevent sicknesses and diseases, as well as increase bone density, and it flushes toxins from your lymphatic system. It's amazing. And not only that, but it's a ton of fun also. I do it every single day for about 15 minutes. And we found the best rebounder on the market today in the world, bar none. It's called the Bellicon Rebounder. It's the Rolls-Royce of rebounders, in my opinion. And let's listen to some of what our guests have had to say about rebounding. Robert von Sarbacher is a health researcher and creator of the Beck Protocol. And Robert, what's your favorite exercise?
In general, probably one of the number one anti-aging exercises on the planet is rebounding. So 15 minutes a day is good for that. You can find people who have had thermography scans on cancers, giant tumors, and when they're doing a rebounder, it would start spewing out and shrinking right in front of your eyes, the tumor would, as they're on the rebounder. So it's really good for that sort of thing. It's also very good for exercising internal organs. It's the only internal organ exerciser that I know of known to man.
Dr. Lindsay Duncan is the CEO and founder of Genesis Today. And what's the best way that you think of to stimulate the lymphatic system of the body?
Rebounding is incredible because it's good for the lymphatic system, and there's more lymph fluid in the body than there is blood. And the quickest way and the most effective way to get the lymphatic system flowing is through rebounding itself.
Yeah, because the lymphatic system can't really detox itself, can it? I think you know.
No, the heart, we have the heart, thank you, for pumping blood. And we don't have a heart to pump lymphatic fluid. The only thing that really can pump lymphatic fluid is cardiovascular exercise utilizing the thighs, the thigh muscles. And that's why rebounding and getting a burn in that thigh muscle is so important for the flow and the stimulation of the lymphatic fluid.
Wow, and they even put cancer patients on rebounding, don't they?
Nutritionists do.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but not a conventional doctor. But yeah, I've been learning about rebounding lately. It's quite an amazing thing.
Yeah, rebounding's amazing.
Health researcher and author of Cancer Step Outside the Box, Ty Bollinger. What do you do in your life to prevent cancer?
What do you do to treat cancer? What do you do to prevent it? Rebounding is something that I try to do on a daily basis. A little mini trampoline for those people that aren't familiar with the term rebounding, but it's basically just jumping up and down on a little mini tramp. What that does is it stimulates the lymphatic system. Lymphatic system is one of our primary detoxification systems in our body, and most folks don't stimulate their lymph flow, and so the toxicity in their body builds up because their lymph is not stimulated, and the up-down motion on a rebounder stimulates the lymph flow better than just about any other exercise. So I do that almost on a daily, probably 5 days a week, I would say I average doing that.
And finally, author and speaker and creator of the Longevity Now program, David Wolf. Do you think the Bellicon is the best rebounder on the market today?
Absolutely. I was just with the crew in Europe that does the Bellicon Rebounder, which is an incredible rebounder. My God, what a machine. And it doesn't use metal springs. It uses like flexi ropes. So it's very soft and fun, and it's just great to play with.
Well, there you have it. The up and down G-force actually stimulates every single cell in your body. It's incredible. And as someone who works out in the gym a lot and does Qigong, I think that the best physical aerobic exercise, in my opinion, is rebounding. It's just absolutely incredible for the human body. And the Bellicon is silent, and it comes with a warranty, and you can get them in several different sizes and colors, and some of them have bars that you can hold on to in case you're worried about balance. It's a well worth it investment in your health and in your future. So check them out in our store if you'd like, or you can check out the videos on extremehealthradio.com/Bellicon. Again, that's extremehealthradio.com/Bellicon. That's B as in boy, ELLICON.
All free shows, all the time, on Extreme Health Radio. Opening minds and transforming lives worldwide. Join our community today. Sign up to our email list and instantly get our free gift to you, along with loads of inspirational content and cutting-edge tips to help change your life at extremehealthradio.com/subscribe.
Well, that was a pretty cool show, wasn't it?
Oh my gosh, my mind is spinning.
I know, right? Interesting
Ebola,
guy.
bird flu, preparedness, moon suits. I love the moon suit.
Yeah, isn't that... it's funny because, with a lot of these shows, as many of you guys know, we have notes that we're going to go over, typically, but we let the conversation guide us, and it sounded like it just kind of went towards the Ebola thing, which is, really poignant for right now.
I think it's perfect.
If you're listening to this, 5-10 years in the future, and there is still a humanity, we haven't all died from Ebola.
Makes you wonder, huh?
Then either we were wrong, or the natural protocols he talked about actually worked and saved some people.
What are your thoughts on the Ebola? It's interesting because you, on a show like ours, it's easy to get swayed either way with our guests, being so certain of what they believe, and you're just basing information off of what you gather from other people. For the most part, we're not all scientists going out and doing our own, research to really figure out what's going on. But, I've heard it said that the Ebola is nothing more than like a big scare tactic. There might not even be such a thing because we haven't actually seen it, or it might be on such a small scale. It's just a lot of hype about nothing. And then you have like today, with Matt talking about how we do need to be prepared because this stuff can spread like wildfire. And I mean, the whole time I'm in the chat room going, gosh, I just feel like though, if your immune system is properly balanced, that's why I feel like people, and personally, I feel like that's how HIV doesn't spread to people. It's how colds and flus don't spread to people. It's like if your immune system is just supercharged, I just think that's your best option against, quote, fighting off anything that's going to try to take you down. But Ebola as well. I could be totally off on that, but
I agree with that completely. I mean, I don't know if there's any way for anyone to even know if you're off on that or not, How
is there?
I mean, it's funny because with the whole Ebola thing, I don't know what it is about my nature, but I just inherently distrust anything that the news media is putting out or what what's supposedly coming down from the government. The government is a very broad term there, but I don't know what it is. I don't disbelieve everything. It's not like I think everything is a conspiracy, but I don't know. I mean, with the Ebola thing, the way I'm going to look at it is it's a real thing, and I'm going to prepare. And I think we should get some of the things that he talked about, and I'm going to do everything I can to be healthier, because of what you just said. And at the same time, I'm not going to put any of my energy into how horrible it is or what cover-ups are happening or how many people are dying, because when you start putting your energy into those parts of life, you start losing your own life force.
I would totally second that.
And I don't know what it is. We've talked about this before, Operation Northwood. There's that did you see the thing that was the plan for the new generation or the new century? It was a document that was written before 9/11.
No.
And it was allegedly came from the government that was talking about how in order to fortify our place in the world in terms of being a superpower.
You mean the United States?
The United States. We would have to have another Pearl Harbor is the exact quote. And this was, I don't know, not long before 9/11. And so I don't know if these things are conspiracies or not. Operation Northwood was a thing that was going on where we're going to bomb essentially unmanned drones to cause the Cuban Missile Crisis to escalate and to cause and potential ending to the Cold War. This was all going on when Kennedy. This was signed by the Joint Chiefs of Staff. So there's a track record of
deceit.
Yeah.
Or underhandedness or plotting.
And I don't even think that it's all that. People start hating the government, but, I don't even think, every organism's desire is to stay alive. And in order to stay alive, the government needs, and the media sources need to have what they sell as fear. And so is Ebola something that, think about how easy it would be for the whole Ebola thing to be faked.
Yeah, we've talked about this before, or any outbreak of sorts.
Yeah, I don't know. Like I saw, I was at somewhere, I think at the gym, and this was when the Ebola thing was happening a couple months ago, it first came over, and there was a helicopter shot of the two people who had arrived back from Africa who were infected with the Ebola virus. These were the doctors, that were the American doctors, and they
going to do relief work.
And there was a lot of uproar about whether or not these people should even be allowed back.
Yeah,
in the
I
United
remember
States. Remember that?
Mm-hmm.
And it was like CNN or something, and I was at the gym in between sets, and I look over at the TV set, and there's helicopter footage of these two people, and the TV was on mute, but across the bottom it was explaining what was going on. And I just thought to myself, like, how easy would that be to just
take a shot of a helicopter and make up a story? Nobody really knows what's going on. All we're given are pictures and stories. That's, unless my next door neighbor, I see their insides plasticizing or they're bleeding out or something, I just have a really hard time until I actually see proof of something. But
if you were to put the news media through the same scrutiny that you would have to do through the scientific process or through a court proceeding, where you had evidence and facts, and you had to back up those facts with reliable witnesses and all these things. If you were to put the news through that same scrutiny, would it be able to stand up to that? I don't know. But I just think that whether it's true or not, we need to take a lot of what he was saying to heart.
I agree. Well, because I think in general, it's good to be prepared for anything, because I know, I agree with him probably. I mean, I don't know. I'm not a scientist or I haven't studied this, but I'd say my guess was about 5% of the population's actually even prepared with earthquake kits and batteries and flashlights and water and extra food.
Yeah, we're not.
I mean, we're not. We have tiny little bits of things in our shed out there, but hardly anything, That's
going to be on our to-do list.
It's on our to-do list, that's for sure. But I do think that there is some sort of power when the government, makes everyone panic, but they're also not spreading, hey, let's get prepared. The government's not helping you out by any means, saying go out and prepare yourselves or have these things on hand like Matt Stein's talking about. I mean, I think if anything, all of us should at least be doing that, no matter what comes or what doesn't come our way. It's just it's smart. It's really smart it's investing in yourself. It's investing in your greatest potential future for, whatever could happen, because day to day we don't know what could happen. I mean,
yeah, because people talk a lot about, I've heard, some of our group of friends talk about, if something happened, we didn't even get into solar flares or solar storms or any of this kind of stuff, or the grid collapsing, but
nuclear stuff.
Yeah, nuclear stuff. If a nuclear power plant, were to explode or something, I've heard people say, well, what does it really matter if you have enough food for 2 weeks? I mean, all of the area in the part of the world is going to be contaminated and people are going to be vaporized. So if you happen to be alive, I mean, why would you even want to be alive anyway, right?
I mean, that's a valid point, though.
But you know what, though? I think that there are situations that could happen that are much less drastic, like just a simple earthquake, where it's not necessarily a power plant goes out or another Fukushima happens or a solar flare hits and it changes the magnetic thing of the earth and all of the power goes out for the entire earth for 9-10 months or a year. I think there's a lot less stuff that could happen where you are out for a couple weeks, and it's like at that point it's not like everyone's dying around you,
right? People
are just needing to learn how to barter, and so those types of low level stuff I think are much more likely to happen than big things stuff. But eventually some big stuff is going to happen at some point. We just don't know when.
Right.
But so it's sort of like the people saying, well, it's all going to crash and burn. The world's going to burn and we're all going to burn anyway. So why take care of your health now? That's the same concept of
same mentality.
Well, why would I want to live if
everyone else around me is dead, or if we're all going to die anyway? Why prolong it for 2 weeks? I know
Chernobyl happens and half the population's gone. Why would I want to live anyway? I mean, that's the same kind of mindset. More likely is it going to be something where a lot of people
a little screwed up for a week or two at the most. Yeah.
So I don't know. What do you think about Ebola? Are you concerned with it? Do you think about it much, or? Well,
I do have to say that when he was talking about it, because the government apparently claims right now that it's just bodily fluids. It can be passed that way. Right. And they're trying not to, I think, get people, if it indeed is as scary as they say it is, I think that they're trying not to spread fear. Right. They don't want to spread panic, so they're not saying that it could be possibly spread through the air. If that's true, and it is, then I mean, I think the only way it would affect me personally today is I'd be a little bit leery about getting on a plane, probably, because I feel like you have so much international stuff going on at airports, and being in a plane that would make me the most nervous.
You think a little bit.
Make me think, and I don't even know if I'd be nervous, but that's the situation. I thought it was interesting at the end how he said, maybe possibly the days of world travel are becoming, shortened. Yeah. And that's a bummer, because you think, things are just getting so great. I mean, we're going to have these planes that are going to be able to fly people across the world in, 2 hours. And, but I don't know if it's going to make way. I mean, this might be way out there on a limb, but what if that's to make way for new technology so you can teleport yourself? You don't have to be around, airports and crowded places with people with possible diseases or I was going to say it also, I mean, the conspiracy theorist or realist in me also thinks well, if these are real diseases and they are going on and they are spreading and they're just out of control and no one's able to travel within countries, that just seems like the kind of thing that the government would want to keep people in these small contained land masses, so they have more control over you, because the world that's their way of making the world smaller.
Right.
Because, I mean, we always talk about how it's not natural to live in a little houses all in a row, like these little cookie cutter houses, keep everybody close,
Right.
make sure nobody's doing their individual thing. The person who's living out on the farm,
that way neighbors can spy on each other and
rat each other out
for smoking pot or something like
or having a meth lab in there, whatever they're doing. I mean, some of these things aren't helpful to humanity, but at the same time, it's like, I think you've said that the government's like kind of wanting its own citizens to rise up against each other in order to have more control over people. So that would make kind of sense to me, and that would be very alarming to me if I feel like they're going to like kind of quote shut down the world travel, because that seems very control. That just seems like control on a whole new level. And at that point, I'd be like, I'm out of here.
I'm on a boat.
Yeah, I'm on a boat. I'm taking my surfboard and I'm just paddling till my arms fall off. And
I know,
that's
right?
where I'm ending up.
Yeah, it's interesting because the whole idea of Elon Musk and all of his travel. Things he wants to do with that. What do you call what's the name of that
thing about Mars?
Well, not only that, but just the super tubes that he's talking about doing with the magnetic railway systems.
Yeah.
I forget. There's a certain name for that, but he's talking about being going from New York to Sydney or Hong Kong in like 1 or 2 hours using these underground magnetic railways and stuff. And
I'm looking them up right here.
And so imagine. If that were possible, you would kind of get rid of the need for airports, which would be okay. But then you're still getting people from that might be affected with Ebola able to go somewhere in 2 hours. So even though the airport component is out, you still have someone with Ebola traveling from China to Australia,
right?
In 2 hours. I mean, imagine that. I mean, imagine how quickly. A pandemic could happen in that regard. That would be crazy.
Yeah, I guess I just never. I don't know. I mean, the people in the past that he was talking about, the Spanish flu and major outbreaks of other things. I mean, everyone always probably thinks that they're going to get wiped out. This is it. Like this thing is taking over the earth, and yet people have. I mean, though it wipes out millions of people, which is just horrendous. In general, the world goes on, so it's. Also, I think really important just to not become a panicker and a
fear-driven person.
I think because it's so easy to go there. I mean,
yeah,
I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's really critical to shield yourself from mainstream media and things that are going to put a lot of fear in you. And I think what he was talking about was really cool. Was just to fortify your immune system, live healthy, live strong, live happy, be motivated, and all that. And so. If you ever do get exposed to certain things, then your body's immune system is going to be very strong. Well, I think that's the best way to deal with it.
I think so too. And we were talking to Matt off the air for quite a while there, and he's so fascinating.
Yeah.
But he was kind of delving into a bit of just the power of the mind. He was talking about how he basically, I don't know how to phrase this, but unleashed the deadly power of a bee sting.
Oh, right.
By in his mind, the minute he was stung, going in and sort of dissipating that whole situation by the power of his thoughts. And I'm thinking, okay, well, that's huge. And if people are doing that, which I believe they have in many cases, gotten through a lot of really dire, situations where your health was and your life was on the line. I think that if you, quote, stay more in a positive space in your life, along with even utilizing a lot of things like, talking yourself down from things or out of things and just giving yourself the will to overcome something or to live through something.
Yeah,
I think that's altogether the best thing. And be prepared, on what you can, and then trust and pray and hope that you never have to use it. But if you do, just to remain a little bit calm,
It blew me away that there is a website that he mentioned called, we're going to put it on the show link. What is it called? What was his website called?
Which one? ApprovedGasmask.com?
Approved Gas Mask.
Is that the one you're talking about?
Oh my goodness. Isn't that funny?
Well, we always kind of laughed because you go into those old museums and you see, these old, back masks from back in the wars.
Yeah.
And we laugh at them now because they look so ridiculous. But, we're thinking, did every home really have those back in the day? And that probably wasn't the truth, but we used to think that they were so ridiculous. But, I mean, I guess when you're dealing with stuff like nuclear stuff and possible rampant disease, I mean, it's not that far from, they were onto something.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I'm just laughing because it's, in today's world, you have the most interesting websites out there that are serving a very unique niche group of people. Approved gas masks. Pretty cool stuff, though.
Pretty weird, huh? Yeah,
really interesting. So I hope you guys got a lot of value out of that. And we're going to try to post all the links in that page, in our show page here, which is extremehealthradio.com/326. And we're going to put links to his books, and his website's got a ton of different stuff. You know what fascinates me most is those Bob Beck SOTA instruments. I've heard a lot about those from David Wolf, but they've got a silver pulsar, magnetic pulsar, water ozonator, and a biotuner.
That biotuner looks interesting.
Yeah, these things are only a couple $100, so it might be a really interesting thing to look into.
Yeah, are those top things that you were thinking about investing in? Like, I definitely want to make sure that we know how to make our own silver and things for the nebulizer, and I think that stuff's important too. Yeah.
If you guys are interested, we have a product that I think is really amazing, and it's put out by a guy we really enjoy called Steve Barwick, and you can check out the silver that he talks about how to create it at extremehealthradio.com/make-silver, all one word, lowercase, extremehealthradio.com/make-silver. And we'll put links to that in the show notes as well. And I also want to let you guys know, too, about this really interesting summit that's going on right now. If you guys are interested in this type of free information, it's the Self-Reliance Summit. So if you go to extremehealthradio.com/self-reliance, you'll be able to check that out. SELFRELIANCE, extremehealthradio.com/self-reliance. You'll be able to check out that summit. And Matt Stein is on that one, as well as Marjorie Wildcraft and a bunch of other cool people, too.
Nice.
So, yeah, there's a ton of free information on there if you guys are interested.
I have to say, too, that we meant to mention this in the podcast or in the live show, but we didn't. But Matt's going to have a great article coming out in the next few days.
Oh, yeah.
It has the best title ever. It reminds me of our guest yesterday who had the most interesting title of the book about the parasites.
Oh,
Rosemary
yeah.
Drysdale. That was hilarious. But his article to be on the lookout for is called Ebola, coming to a theater near you. And you can read more about that. And that's supposed to be published, I think he said, by the end of the weekend. So about 4 days from now.
So you might be listening to this a little bit in the future.
But it'll be there.
Yeah, we'll put links to all that stuff on extremehealthradio.com/326. Yeah. Everything we talked about today. Pretty cool stuff. Reminds me of that movie, The Outbreak. Remember that? You ever see that?
I didn't see it, but yeah.
With Rene Russo, Dustin Hoffman, like in the early 90s.
Outbreak.
Talk about a movie spreading fear and government and complete reliance in the government to help control these types of situations.
Well, it's also like that one that came out with Gwyneth Paltrow a couple of years ago, Contagion.
Oh, I didn't see that. Did you see it?
No, but I heard it's gnarly. I don't need to see it, but...
Yeah, you got to protect your...
Yeah, got to protect your mentals.
Yeah, got to protect your psyche,
Mm-hmm.
All right, so hopefully you guys enjoyed that show. This was really a fun one to be a part of with you guys, and please pass it on to your friends. And if you guys could do us a favor, we would greatly appreciate this. Each and every one of you listeners, I should say, that are listening to our show, what are you laughing at?
I'm just laughing. I'll tell you afterward. This is good.
Okay, I'll wait to hear about that. But if you guys could leave us a review on iTunes, we'd greatly appreciate that. It really helps us a lot. And each and every one of you that does this for us will help us so much. So we appreciate that. Go to iTunes and type in Extreme Health Radio in the search bar, and our show will come up. Subscribe and leave us a rating. And if you guys are also interested in any of the products that we talked about on today's show or links, you can go to our store, extremehealthradio.com/store. We've got lots of really great, unique products there for you. And
I think we should add a tab.
A tab?
extremehealthradio.com/moonsuit.
Moonsuit.
Do they make moonsuits for dachshunds?
That would be hilarious.
I wonder if they make animal suits.
A little dachshund.
There's a new multi-billion-dollar idea.
You'd have to get a little
suits for dachshunds,
like an extension for their back.
Yeah. You'd have
make them a little bit longer.
You'd have the collapsible version for a Chihuahua, and then you just pull it apart for a dachshund.
And then you take half the leg off. And detachable legs.
Or you just have them like roaming around, tripping all over the extra material.
Oh man. So thank you, everybody, guys, for joining us. Yeah, that was a lot of fun. And join us tomorrow on our Free for All Friday show. Really appreciate all you guys. So thank you for listening. And
we will catch you on the next episode.
Look at that dramatic pause.
Hopefully not in your moon suit.
Hey, everybody. This is Josie, Justin's mum. Don't tell him, but I know he would absolutely be really happy if you would sign up to his free weekly newsletter. And don't forget to share this with all your friends. This is the buzzing bumblebee signing off.
So good.
Oh my gosh.
Thank you for listening to this episode.
It's time to go for now, but our mission does not end with this show.
Justin and Kate will be back with another interview packed full of ideas, discoveries, and unique ways to regain your health.
Head on over to extremehealthradio.com/subscribe and instantly download our free gift too that contains cutting-edge strategies to start making healthy lifestyle changes today.
No material on this blog is intended to suggest that you should not seek professional medical care. Always work with qualified medical professionals, even if you educate yourself in the field of live food, nutrition, and alternative medicine. I'm not a doctor, nor am I offering